The radio crackled, and Derek's voice cut through the wind like a knife. He fired me for refusing to bypass a safety protocol that would have killed us all. He thought he held the power because he signed the checks. He was wrong. I was 200 feet in the air, holding a 20-ton shipping container, and I decided to show him exactly what gravity and a Union man pushed too far could do. There is a specific kind of silence you only find at 200 feet. It's not a true silence, of course. The wind is always howling, battering the tempered glass of the cab like an angry spirit trying to get in. The steel structure of the crane groans and creaks, a metallic symphony of stress and tension that only an operator learns to tune out. But compared to the chaos of the port below, with the screaming engines of the semi-trucks, the shouting stevedores, and the constant clank of metal on pavement, up here, it felt like a sanctuary. I adjusted the controls, feeling the massive machine respond to the slightest twitch of my fingers. My name is Frank Mercer, but on the docks, they just call me Iron. I've been sitting in this chair, or one just like it, for 32 years. I know the rhythm of the port better than I know the layout of my own backyard. I know that when the tide goes out, the smell of brine and diesel gets heavy enough to taste. I know that the seagull nesting on the counterweight jib hasn't moved in 3 seasons. And I know exactly how much sway a 20-ton container creates in a 15-knot crosswind. Iron, you copy. The voice on the radio broke my concentration. It wasn't Toby, my usual spotter. Toby respected the silence. This was the nasal, impatient whine of Derek Walker. I sighed, staring out at the horizon where the gray ocean met the gray sky. Derek was 28 years old, wore a hard hat that looked like it had just come out of the plastic wrapper, and drove a BMW that cost more than my first house. He was the nephew of someone important, installed as the site foreman 3 weeks ago to optimize efficiency. In port terms, that usually meant cutting corners until someone got squashed. "I copy, Walker," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I'm in the middle of a lift. Container 404 Bravo. Heavy load. You're moving too slow, Frank," Derek snapped. "The trucks are backed up to the gate. We're losing money by the second. I need you to bypass the load sway dampener. Just swing it and drop it. We need speed today, not precision." I tightened my grip on the joystick. The dampener was there for a reason. It prevented the massive steel box from turning into a wrecking ball if the wind picked up. Bypassing it was a violation of OSHA regulations, company policy, and common sense. "Negative," I replied, watching the container hover steadily over the chassis of the waiting truck. "Wind is gusting at 18 knots. If I disable the dampener and we catch a gust, I could take out the truck cab. I'm not killing a driver to save you 3 minutes." "I didn't ask for your opinion, Mercer." Derek's voice rose an octave. "I gave you a direct order. Override the safety and speed it up." I looked down. From this height, the people looked like ants. I could see Derek standing near the loading bay, a tiny figure in a bright orange vest, pacing back and forth, waving his arms at the ground crew. He was a tourist in a land of giants, trying to command forces he didn't understand. "I said negative," I repeated, lowering the container with agonizing, deliberate precision. It locked onto the chassis with a soft thud. "I operate by the book. You want it done faster? Come up here and do it yourself." The radio went silent for a long 10 seconds. The wind buffeted the cab, rocking me gently. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee from the thermos. I knew I had pushed him. Men like Derek Walker hate being told no, especially by men with grease under their fingernails. But I also knew the code. The operator is the captain of the ship. Up here, my word was law. Or so I thought. The lift was complete. I was swinging the boom back toward the stack, the giant magnet block empty and waiting for its next meal. The sun was starting to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the shipping yard. It was usually my favorite time of day. The shift was almost over. The hard work was behind us, and the promise of a hot dinner was just an hour away. But the radio crackled again, and this time there was no whine in Derek's voice, just cold, malicious intent. "Mercer, bring the boom to a rest position," Derek said. "I've got 3 more containers on the manifest, Walker," I replied, checking my clipboard. "The Lady Jane sails at dawn. These need to be on the deck." "Not by you." "They don't," he said. "Bring the boom to rest. You're done." My hands froze on the controls. "Excuse me, you heard me. You fired. Insubordination. Refusal to follow a direct order from a superior officer." I'm marking it down as a safety violation on your record, too. Negligence. The audacity took the breath out of me. Negligence. For refusing to be negligent. You can't fire me over the radio, Derek, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And you certainly can't fire me for following safety protocols. The union rep will eat you alive. I already called the union hall, Derek lied. I could hear the smirk in his voice. Told them you were operating under the influence. Erratic behavior, slurred speech. I'm pulling you off the chair immediately. Pack your trash and climb down. Security is waiting to escort you off the property. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a firing. It was an execution of my career. An accusation of drinking on the job, that would strip my license. I'd never work a crane again. I'd lose my pension. I'd lose the reputation I spent 3 decades building. He was destroying my life because I wouldn't let him break the rules. I looked down at the yard. I could see the security cruiser flashing its lights near the base of the crane. Derek was standing next to it, arms crossed, looking up at me. He looked so small, so insignificant, yet he had the power to ruin everything. "Did you hear me, Mercer?" Derek barked. "Power down and get your ass down here, now!" I looked at the control panel. The lights were green. The engine was humming a deep, powerful bass note. I looked at the exit gate, the single lane in and out of this section of the port. It was a narrow choke point, flanked by concrete barriers and deep water. "You want me to stop working?" I asked, my voice calm, almost conversational. "I want you off my sight," Derek spat. "All right, Derek," I said, "I'll stop working. But first, I have one last move to make." I grabbed the joystick. I wasn't going to rest the boom. I swung it hard to the left, out toward the stack of high-priority imports. The crane responded instantly, the massive arms sweeping across the sky. Down on the ground, I saw confusion. Men stopped walking. They looked up. They knew the shift wasn't over, and they knew that swing path wasn't toward the ship. "Mercer, what are you doing?" Derek's voice lost its arrogance, replaced by a spike of panic. "I said power down!" I ignored him. I focused entirely on the target. It was a 40-foot container, painted a dull, rusted red. It was sitting at the top of Stack 4. I knew this container. It had been sitting there for 3 days, flagged for special handling by Derek himself. He had been obsessively checking on it, yelling at anyone who went near it. I lowered the spreader. The twist locks engaged with a metallic clank that reverberated through the steel cables. I lifted it. 20 tons of steel rose into the air, hovering effortlessly. "Mercer, put that down!" Derek was screaming now. "That is not on the manifest, put it down!" "You fired me, Derek," I said into the mic, watching the load swing. "I don't work for you anymore. I'm just cleaning up." I slewed the crane toward the main gate. The single exit road was currently empty, save for a lone security guard who was looking up with his mouth open. The road was a bridge, essentially a causeway with a harbor on both sides. If that road was blocked, nothing came in. Nothing went out. The 20 trucks lined up to leave? Stuck. The delivery for the Lady Jane? Stuck. The delivery for the Lady Jane? Derek's precious efficiency metrics obliterated. I positioned the container directly over the narrowest point of the exit road. I checked my monitors. No people, no vehicles, just asphalt. "Mercer, don't you dare!" Derek shrieked. "I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for everything you own." "You already took my job and my reputation," I said, my hand hovering over the release toggle. "You got nothing left to threaten me with." I looked at the wind gauge. 12 knots. "Steady. This is for the safety violation," I whispered. I flipped the toggle. The clamps disengaged. For a split second, the container hung in the air, suspended by nothing but momentum. Then gravity took its due. The massive red box plummeted. It didn't tumble. It fell flat, perfectly aligned with the road. The impact shook the entire crane tower. Boom! It was a sound like a bomb going off. Dust and asphalt shards sprayed into the air. The container slammed into the road, embedding itself into the tarmac, effectively turning the exit gate into a steel wall. But it didn't just land. The force of the impact was so violent that the rusted seams of the container split open. I leaned forward, squinting through the glass. The doors had buckled, and something was spilling out. It wasn't standard cargo. It looked like heavy spools, industrial equipment. I didn't care what it was. I just knew that nobody was going anywhere. "Oops," I said into the radio. "Slipped." I reached for the ignition key of the crane, twisted it to off, and pulled it out of the slot. The engine died, plunging the cab into a sudden, ringing silence. I looked at the silver key in my hand, then I opened the side window. The ocean wind rushed in, cold and biting. "Mercer," Derek whispered over the radio, his voice trembling. I leaned out the window and tossed the key. It caught the light for a brief second before disappearing into the dark, churning water of the harbor 200 feet below. "Come and get me," I said to the dead air. There is a finality to throwing a key into the ocean that is hard to describe. It's a small object, barely 3 ounces of brass and plastic, but when it hit the water, the ripple effect was instantaneous. I watched it vanish. The dark water swallowed it whole, and with it, the only immediate way to move the massive Liebherr crane I was sitting in. These aren't like cars, you can't just hotwire them. The ignition sequence is digital and encrypted, tied to that specific fob. Without it, this crane was nothing more than a $2 million paperweight, a 200-foot steel statue giving the middle finger to the entire Port Authority. Inside the cab, the radio was still screaming. "Mercer, answer me. The sensors are showing a catastrophic impact at the gate. What did you do?" I reached over and clicked the volume knob to OAFI. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the whistling wind. I took a moment to look down at the havoc I had wrought. The red container lay across the exit lanes like a fallen monolith. Behind it, the line of semi-trucks was already growing. I could see the drivers climbing out of their cabs, throwing their hands up, walking toward the gate to see what had happened. The queue stretched back past the warehouse, all the way to the loading docks. The arteries of the port were severed. Nothing was coming in. Nothing was getting out. And then, I looked closer at the container itself. From my vantage point, looking straight down, I had the perfect angle on the damage. The impact had twisted the steel frame, popping the roof seam like a zipper. I grabbed the pair of high-powered binoculars I kept in my bag, usually for spotting ships on the horizon, and focused them on the split metal. It was supposed to be empty, or at worst, filled with low-grade scrap metal destined for recycling. That's what 404 Bravo designated on the manifest. But through the lenses, I saw something else. Glinting in the fading sunlight, peeking through the torn roof, was the unmistakable shine of bright, polished copper. And not just wire-thick, industrial-grade spools of it. Beside the copper, I saw the distinctive black casing of server racks. My stomach tightened. That wasn't scrap. That was high-value cargo. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of electronics and raw copper. Why was Derek Walker shipping a fortune in tech and metal out of the country in a container marked as garbage? I lowered the binoculars. The adrenaline of the drop was fading, replaced by the cold clarity of realization. I hadn't just caused a traffic jam. I had accidentally smashed open a piñata that Derek Walker had been very, very desperate to keep sealed. I packed my thermos. I put my sunglasses in their case. I zipped up my heavy canvas jacket. "Well, Frank," I muttered to myself, "you wanted to make a point. I think you just made a war. The descent from a gantry crane is a punishment for a young man. For a 58-year-old with bad knees, it's a trial." I opened the cab door and stepped out onto the catwalk. The wind whipped at my clothes, tearing at my jacket. I grabbed the cold steel railing and started the long walk to the tower ladder. Every step rang out against the metal grating, a rhythmic clang-clang that marked my departure from the sky. I paused at the first landing, 50 feet down. My breathing was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Below me, the scene was turning into an anthill of activity. I could see Derek Walker running, actually running toward the crushed container. He wasn't checking on the safety of the drivers. He was trying to cover the hole. I watched as he frantically pulled a tarp from a nearby forklift and tried to throw it over the split seam, shouting at the confused security guards to back away. He was terrified. I kept climbing down, hand over hand, boot over boot. By the time I reached the bottom platform, 20 feet off the ground, a small crowd had gathered at the base of the crane. It was mostly the ground crew guys I'd known for years. Big Mike, the stevedore, Hernandez, the forklift driver, and Toby, my apprentice. They weren't angry. They looked awestruck. They were staring up at me like I was a ghost returning to Earth. I took the final steps and jumped the last 2 feet to the asphalt. My boots hit the ground with a heavy thud. "Frank!" The scream came from my left. Derek Walker was sprinting toward me, his face a mask of purple rage. He was flanked by two port security officers, but they looked hesitant. They knew me. They knew I brought donuts on Fridays. They didn't know Derek, other than the fact that he yelled at them for taking bathroom breaks. "You lunatic," Derek screeched, stopping inches from my face. Spittle flew from his mouth. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed company property. You blocked the federal highway access. I'll have you buried under the jail." I stood my ground, towering over him by 3 inches. I dusted off my jacket, deliberately ignoring his outburst. "I'm off the clock, Walker," I said calmly. "You fired me. Remember, move that crane," he demanded, pointing a trembling finger at the tower. "Get back up there and move that container right now, or I swear to—" "Can't," I interrupted. "Keys are gone." Derek froze. "What? Keys?" I repeated, pantomiming a throwing motion. "Ocean. Splash." His eyes bulged. He looked at the dark water of the harbor, then back at me, then up at the 200-foot tower blocking the sky. The realization hit him. He couldn't move the container, he couldn't move the crane, and he couldn't get the trucks out. "Arrest him!" Derek shrieked at the security guards. "Detain him! He's a saboteur!" One of the guards, a man named Miller, stepped forward. "Walker, we're private security, not police. We can't arrest him unless he poses an active physical threat. He's just standing there." "He destroyed the exit." "Accident," I said dryly. "Like you said on the radio, I was negligent." Clumsy old me. I stepped around Derek. He tried to grab my arm, but I shook him off with a shrug of my shoulder that sent him stumbling back. "I'm going to my truck," I said. "Since I can't leave the property because someone blocked the exit, I'll be in the parking lot waiting for the real police. I imagine they'll want to see the manifest for that container you're so worried about." Derek went pale. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He didn't say another word. He just watched me walk away, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. My pickup truck, a battered Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it, was parked near the break room. It was trapped, just like every other vehicle on the pier. The container had effectively turned the port into a prison, and I was locked in with the warden. I climbed into the cab of my truck and locked the doors. The familiar smell of old coffee and stale tobacco was comforting. It was a little bubble of safety in a world that was rapidly going to hell. I pulled out my phone. My hands were finally starting to shake. The adrenaline crash was coming. I took a deep breath, forcing the tremors to stop. I had poked the bear, and now the bear was going to come for me with lawyers, police, and corporate fixers. I needed a shield. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 4 years. August Clark. August and I went back 20 years. He used to be a structural welder until a trench collapsed on a job site in Jersey. I was the crane operator that day. I held the shoring wall in place with my boom for 3 hours, ignoring the foreman's order to evacuate while the fire department dug him out. If I had moved, the wall would have crushed him. I didn't move. He lost a leg, but he kept his life. He used the settlement money to go to school. He got into digital forensics, private investigation, the kind of stuff that makes corporate headaches disappear or creates them. I hit dial. It rang twice. "Iron," a gravelly voice answered. No pleasantries, no hello. He knew who it was. I saw the news. "The news?" I asked, surprised. "It just happened 10 minutes ago." "Port scanner Twitter feed," August said. "Catastrophic blockage at Port Gate 4. Crane operator went rogue." "That you?" "That's me," I admitted. "You okay? Physically?" "Yeah. Legally. I'm about to be in a lot of trouble, August. I need the favor." "Name it." "I got fired by a nepotism hire named Derek Walker. He tried to frame me for drinking. I dropped a container to block the exit." August chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Subtle. The container split open, August. It was marked as scrap, 404 Bravo. But I saw copper spools, computer racks, high-end stuff. Walker's terrified. He's trying to cover it up right now with a tarp." The line went silent. The humor vanished from August's voice. "Smuggling," August said. "If he's shipping high-value copper as scrap, he's stealing from the company and selling it overseas. No customs declaration, no taxes. That's federal, Frank." "I need you to prove it," I said. "Because in about 20 minutes, the real cops are going to be here. And Walker is going to paint me as a disgruntled drunk who destroyed the port. I need to flip the script. Sit tight, August said. Don't say a word to the police. Don't sign anything. I'm tapping into the port's inventory network now. If you doctor the manifest, there will be a digital footprint. I'll be your lawyer of record until I get there. You just hold the line, Iron. I'm not going anywhere, I said, looking out the windshield. Outside, the blue flashing lights of the Port Authority police were reflecting off the warehouse walls. They were here. August? Yeah? Dig deep. I want to bury this kid. Consider it done, August said. Hang up. Put the phone away. Here comes the cavalry. The arrival of the Port Authority police is never subtle. It was a cacophony of sirens, the heavy slam of cruiser doors, and the harsh glare of spotlights cutting through the gathering dusk. 2 cruisers pulled up right behind the blockage, their lights reflecting off the twisted red metal of the fallen container. I sat in my truck, hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, waiting. Derek was there instantly, practically dragging the first officer toward my vehicle. It was Officer Davis. I knew Davis. He was a good man, a 20-year veteran who had worked the docks detail long enough to know the difference between a bad day and a bad criminal. Derek pounded on my window. That's him! That's the maniac! Get him out of there. I rolled down the window slowly. The cold harbor air rushed in, smelling of exhaust and impending rain. Evening, Frank, Davis said, ignoring Derek's screaming. He leaned down, his eyes scanning the interior of my cab. Quite a mess you made out there. Traffic is backed up to the interstate. Evening, Officer Davis, I replied calmly. Accidents happen. Accident, Derek shrieked. He did it on purpose. He was drunk. I fired him for being intoxicated on the job, and he retaliated by destroying the exit. I want a breathalyzer test right now. Davis looked at Derek, then back at me. Is that true, Frank? You been drinking? Not a drop, I said. Mr. Marici, Walker here fired me for refusing to bypass a safety lock out on the crane. He invented the drinking charge to cover his tracks with the union. Wire! Derek yelled. Test him! Davis sighed. He pulled a breathalyzer unit from his belt. Standard procedure in an industrial accident, Frank. Step out of the vehicle, please. I stepped out. The asphalt was cold under my boots. A crowd of drivers and dock workers had gathered at the perimeter, watching the show. I blew into the tube until it beeped. Davis checked the readout. Uh-oh. Davis read aloud. He turned the screen toward Derek. He's stone cold sober, Mr. Walker. Derek blinked, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. He blinked, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. He must be on drugs then. Pills. You need to take him to the station for a blood test. I'm not arresting a man for 0.00, Davis said, his voice hardening. Now, about moving this container. We need a heavy wrecker. But first, we need that crane moved. It's swinging in the wind. I can't move it, Derek stammered. He threw the keys in the ocean. Davis looked at me. I just shrugged, slipped out of my hand while I was packing up. Terrible luck. Davis looked up at the towering crane, then at the blocked exit, then at the impossible traffic jam. He rubbed his temples. All right, if the keys are gone, we need a locksmith or a tech from the manufacturer. That's going to take hours. In the meantime, nobody leaves. This is unacceptable, Derek shouted. I have cargo that needs to move. Nobody is moving anything, Mr. Walker, Davis said firmly. This is now an active accident investigation scene. I'm calling in the commercial vehicle enforcement team to inspect the damage to the road and the container. At the word inspect, Derek went rigid. It was a subtle reaction, a stiffening of his shoulders, but I saw it. He looked at the split seam of the container, then back at the police officer. That won't be necessary, Derek said, his voice suddenly dropping half an octave. It's just scrap metal, company property. I'll handle the cleanup internally. We don't need enforcement poking around. Roads damaged, Davis said, taking out his notepad. County property. They inspect everything. Procedure. Derek looked like he was about to vomit. I was allowed to return to my truck while Davis coordinated traffic control. I wasn't under arrest, but I wasn't free to leave either. I was in limbo. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text from August. Secure line. Call me. I put the phone to my ear, keeping my head down. I'm here. I'm in the system. August's voice came through, crisp and fast. Frank, you really stepped in it this time, but you stepped in something good. What did you find? I pulled the digital manifest for container 404 Bravo, August said. According to the official log submitted to the Port Authority, that box is filled with Class C recycled steel shavings. Gross weight 18,000 pounds. The crane scale read 42,000 pounds when I lifted it, I said. I felt the weight. That wasn't shavings. Exactly, August said. But here's where it gets interesting. I traced the shipping destination. It's not going to a recycling center. It's tagged for a shell company in Malaysia that, according to my quick check, doesn't actually have a recycling facility. It's an electronics importer. I glanced out the window. Derek was pacing frantically by the police cruiser making a phone call. He was sweating, despite the chill in the air. So he's smuggling copper? I asked. Better, August said. I cross-referenced the company's internal inventory. You know that massive retrofit project on the north side, the one the company just finished? Yeah, the data center job. They reported a loss due to theft last week. $2 million worth of high-grade copper cabling and server blades. They claimed it was stolen from the site by gangs. The pieces clicked together in my head. Derek didn't report his stolen because gangs took it. He took it. He stole his own company's inventory, wrote it off as a loss for the insurance money, and is now shipping the stolen goods out of the country to sell them again, August explained. Insurance fraud, plus the black market sale. That container is the smoking gun, Frank. And I just dropped it right in front of the cops, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. You didn't just drop it, August laughed. You gift-wrapped it. But listen to me, Iron. Derek knows that container is a time bomb. He's going to try to make a deal with you. He needs that crane move so he can hide the evidence before the inspectors open that door. Do not let him move that crane. I can't, I reminded him. Keys are swimming with the fishes? Good. Keep it that way. I'm 10 minutes out. I'm bringing a friend from the district attorney's office who owes me a favor. Just stall him. Stalling is what I do best, I said. 5 minutes later, the knock on the window came. It wasn't the police. It was Derek. He had composed himself. The panic was gone, replaced by a slick, oily veneer of professionalism. He signaled for me to roll down the window. I lowered it 2 inches. Frank, he said. His voice was soft, almost friendly. It was terrifying. Look, we got off on the wrong foot today. He fired me for following the law, Derek, I said. I know. It's been a stressful week. Corporate is breathing down my neck about quotas. I snapped. I apologize. He paused, waiting for me to accept the apology. I stared at him. Here's the thing, Derek continued, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. This investigation. It's going to be bad for everyone. Bad for the company, bad for the port, bad for you. If the feds get involved, they'll tie up your pension for years in litigation. I can wait, I said. But you don't have to, Derek said. He reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, but he didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a checkbook. I can make this all go away, Frank. I can tell the officers I authorized the drop. A training exercise gone wrong. No harm, no foul. And the firing rescinded, Derek said quickly. You're rehired, with a raise. Hell, I'll give you a bonus. $10,000 right now. Just tell them you have a spare key. Tell them you can move the crane. Let me get my crew to clean up this mess before the inspectors open that box. He was desperate. He was offering me a bribe right there in the parking lot, under the floodlights. He thought everyone had a price. He thought that because I wore a hard hat and drove an old truck, I was hungry enough to eat from his hand. You really are scared of what's in that box, aren't you? I asked quietly. Derek's smile faltered. It's just scrap, Frank. The paperwork is a hassle. You know how it is. I know that 404 Bravo weighs 40,000 pounds, Derek, I said. And I know scrap doesn't sparkle like copper. Derek went still. The fake friendliness evaporated instantly. His eyes went dead. You don't know what you're messing with, old man, he hissed. You think you're a hero? I can bury you. I can make sure you never work again. I can make sure your wife loses her health insurance. That was it. He threatened Karen. I rolled the window up. Frank, open this window! Derek pounded on the glass. I'm talking to you. You take the deal, or I ruin you. I looked him dead in the eye through the glass, pointed at the container, and shook my head. No deal. Derek kicked my tire in frustration and stormed off toward the gate, pulling his phone out again. He was running out of time. Thanks to gravity, he had nowhere to run. The rain started, 10 minutes later, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the asphalt and made the flashing lights of the police cruisers shatter into a million blue shards. I sat in the truck, watching the tableau unfold. Derek was now arguing with two men in reflective vests who had just arrived in the state vehicle marked Commercial Enforcement. They had clipboards. Derek was blocking their path to the container, his arms waving wildly. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was universal panic. My phone buzzed again. "August, I'm at the gate," he said. "They won't let me in." "The whole port is locked down. I see the flashing lights at the entrance," I said. "What now?" "Check your email," August said. "I just sent you a file." "What file?" "Did you know the new Liver cranes have internal cabin telemetry?" August asked, a hint of smugness in his voice. "They record audio and video for training and insurance purposes. It uploads to the cloud every 30 minutes. My eyes widened. I knew about the sensors, but I didn't know they recorded audio inside the cab. "You hacked the crane?" "I accessed the publicly available maintenance server using a default password that nobody bothered to change," August corrected. "Download the clip from 4:15 p.m., the firing, the order to bypass safety. It's all there." I opened my email. There was a video file attached. I clicked play. On the small screen of my phone, a grainy fisheye view of the crane cab appeared. I saw myself, looking tired but focused. Then, Derek's voice came through the speaker, tinny but unmistakable. "I need you to bypass the load sway dampener. Just swing it and drop it. I didn't ask for your opinion, Mercer. I gave you a direct order. And then, the kicker. I already called the Union Hall. Told them you were operating under the influence. Erratic behavior. I'm pulling you off the chair immediately." It was perfect. It was proof of the coercion, the safety violation order, and the premeditated lie about my sobriety. It proved malice. "You beautiful genius," I whispered. "Show that to Officer Davis," August said. "And Frank, the DA contact is with me. We're walking in. Tell the cops at the gate to let legal counsel through." I climbed out of the truck. The rain soaked my jacket instantly, but I didn't care. I walked straight toward the argument by the container. Derek saw me coming and pointed a finger. "Officer, get him back in his vehicle. He's interfering with an investigation." "Officer Davis," I said, raising my voice over the rain. "Before you let Mr. Walker explain why we can't open that container, I think you should hear this." I held up my phone and pressed play. Maximum volume. Derek's voice rang out in the wet air. "Bypass the load sway dampener. Swing it and drop it." Derek froze. The color didn't just drain from his face. It vanished, leaving him looking like a wax figure. The two enforcement officers stopped writing on their clipboards. Officer Davis turned slowly to look at Derek. "That sounds like a direct order to violate federal safety regulations, Mr. Walker," Davis said. "And," I added, letting the video play to the part about the fake DUI charge, "it sounds like filing a false police report, too." Derek stammered, backing away. That's doctored. Deepfake." "You can't trust that. It's from the crane's own server," I said, time-stamped and encrypted. Davis took the phone from my hand, his face grim. "Mr. Walker, I'm going to ask you to step away from the container. Now." "You can't do this," Derek screamed, his composure finally shattering completely. "My uncle owns this site. You work for me." "I work for the Port Authority," Davis said, putting a hand on his holster not drawing, just resting it there. A clear warning. "Step away." Just then, a black sedan rolled past the blockade, escorted by a confused patrol officer. August Clark stepped out. He moved with a distinct limp, leaning on a cane, but he wore a suit that looked like it cost more than Derek's car. Beside him was a woman I didn't recognize, sharp features, trench coat, holding a briefcase. "August," I nodded. "Iron," he replied. He turned to Davis. "August Clark, representing Mr. Mercer. And this is Assistant District Attorney Reynolds. We have reason to believe that the container currently blocking federal transit is evidence of grand larceny and insurance fraud." Derek looked like he was about to faint. "Fraud? That's insane." "It's scrap metal." "If it's scrap," ADA Reynolds said, her voice cutting through the rain, "then you won't mind if we verify the contents. Officer, please open the doors." "No!" Derek lunged forward. actually trying to physically block the enforcement officers. Davis grabbed him. It wasn't gentle. He spun Derek around and slammed him against the side of the police cruiser. Derek Walker, you are detained for obstruction of justice. Stay down. With Derek cuffed and pinned, the enforcement officers approached the container. The impact had already sprung the latch. They just needed to pry it open. One of them grabbed a crowbar from his truck. Creak, groan, bang. The heavy steel doors swung open. A mountain of scrap didn't fall out. Instead, 3 large wooden pallets toppled forward, spilling their contents onto the wet asphalt. It was copper. Thick, braided, bright orange industrial copper cable, still on the spools marked Property of City Data Infrastructure Project. And behind them, stacks of server blades in anti-static bags. The silence on the dock was deafening. Even the truck drivers who had walked up to watch were quiet. "Well," Officer Davis said, shining his flashlight on the spill, "that's the shiniest scrap metal I've ever seen." August walked over to the pile, picked up a loose tag from one of the spools, and read it. Inventory ID matches the stolen lot from last week. Estimated value of this container alone? 200 grand. And looking at the shipping logs I pulled, he looked at Derek. "This is the 5th one you sent out this month." Derek, pressed against the wet cruiser, stopped struggling. He slumped, defeated. Mr. Mercer," Davis said, turning to me, "I think we can drop the investigation into your negligent driving." "I appreciate that, officer," I said, "though I'm still worried about that key I lost." "Don't worry," Davis smirked. "I think the crane manufacturer can rush a technician out here. Considering we just recovered $1 million in stolen goods, the city might even pay for it. The porch of my house overlooks the bay. It's not a big house, but it's paid for." The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and purple, the same colors as the copper wire that sent Derek Walker to federal prison. I sat in my rocking chair, a cold beer in my hand. Karen was inside, humming as she made dinner. "Derek got 10 years. It turns out when you steal from the company, defraud an insurance agency, and falsify police reports, the judge throws the book at you. His uncle, Mr. Holloway, was forced to resign in disgrace. The company offered me my job back, with a promotion to lead trainer. I took it. I don't climb the tower anymore. My knees thank me for that. But I teach the young guys, the Tobys of the world, how to handle the steel. I teach them about wind shear and load limits. But mostly, I teach them that the machine doesn't run the man. The man runs the machine. And a man with a code is stronger than any hydraulics system." I took a sip of beer and looked at the camera. "You know, a lot of people asked me if I was scared when I dropped that container. If I was worried about losing my pension, my house, everything. And the truth is, yeah, I was terrified. But here's the thing about bullies like Derek. They bank on your fear. They think that because they sign the checks, they own your soul. They think you'll swallow your pride and look the other way because you have bills to pay. And for a long time, I did. I kept my head down. The mistake I made was thinking that silence would protect me. It didn't. It just emboldened him. The lesson I learned is that your dignity has a weight to it. It's heavy, and sometimes you have to drop that weight right in front of them to show them they can't move you. So, here's my advice to you. Do your job. Be the best at what you do. Make yourself irreplaceable. But never, ever let someone mistake your service for servitude. Keep your own records. Know your own worth. And if they try to push you off a cliff, make sure you're holding on to something heavy enough to drag them down with you. Trust, but verify. And always know where the keys are. I raise my beer in a toast. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next shift.